At the Memorial Day ceremony, the elderly cemetery groundskeeper paused while arranging flowers. He knelt before a headstone and quietly began to cry. No one knew that this man was the one who brought that soldier home from Vietnam. Kenneth Bradley had experienced 50 Memorial Days at Pine Valley Memorial Cemetery. Every year, he followed the same routine, arriving early in the morning, placing fresh flowers at each veteran headstone, planting small American flags. But this year was different. When he stopped at Sergeant Michael Rodriguez's grave, his hands began to tremble. As he arranged the flowers, he read the inscription on the headstone. Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, 173rd Airborne, 1949, 1969, beloved son and hero. Kenneth's eyes filled with tears. 20 years old. So young, too young. Slowly, he knelt before the headstone. He touched the earth with his hands, as if reliving that day 55 years ago. He remembered that hot June morning in Saigon. His trembling hands as he received Michael's dog tags. The letter written for his family. "I brought you home, son," Kenneth whispered. "Just like I promised, I brought you home." As tears streamed down his cheeks, no one knew that 50 years ago he had served in the Graves Registration Unit. No one knew that he was the person who reunited thousands of fallen soldiers with their families. Hello, welcome to The Last Stand. Have you ever learned something surprising about a family member's military background later in life? Share your experiences in the comments. Kenneth Bradley, 73 years old, had been working as a groundskeeper at Pine Valley Memorial Cemetery for 50 years. Every morning at 6 a.m. he'd arrive at work and walk through the entire cemetery, starting with the veteran section. He was medium height, gray-haired, always neatly dressed, and a quiet man. But Kenneth had one noticeable trait. He spent much more time at veteran graves than at other graves. He would carefully clean each headstone, arrange flowers, and make sure the flags stood properly. The townspeople knew him but knew very little about Kenneth. They knew he wasn't married, had no family, and always lived alone. But they had never asked why he chose this job, why he showed such care for veteran graves. The place Kenneth spent the most time was the veterans section. There were 847 veteran graves in this section. From the Vietnam War, Korean War, World War II, fallen heroes. Every morning the same routine. First he would visit the oldest graves, then continue in chronological order. But when he reached the Vietnam War section, his steps would slow, and he'd stay longer at each grave. People interpreted this as curiosity. Kenneth must be interested in history, they'd say. But the expression in Kenneth's eyes when he looked at those graves was something much deeper than simple curiosity. The strangest part was that when he stopped in front of certain graves, he would move his lips, as if he was talking quietly. But no one could hear him. Memorial Day was the most important day of the year for Kenneth. He would begin preparations a week early. Cleaning every veteran grave, arranging flowers, planting flags. This year, he was making the same preparations. But he felt the fatigue of being 73 years old. Doing the same job for 50 years wasn't easy. Wednesday morning, while working in the veterans section, he stopped in front of Sergeant Michael Rodriguez's grave, 1949-1969. He was only 20 years old when he died. Kenneth touched the headstone. "Memorial Day's here again, Michael," he whispered. "They'll come visit you as always. You need to be ready." No one heard this strange conversation. But Kenneth knew every name in these graves. He knew every story. Memorial Day morning, Kenneth arrived earlier than usual. He opened the cemetery gates at 5:30 a.m. The ceremonies would begin at 10 a.m., and he had a lot of work to do. He checked each of the 847 graves in the veteran section one last time. Were the flowers in place? Were the flags straight? Everything had to be perfect. At 8 a.m., when he reached Sergeant Michael Rodriguez's grave, he stopped. He read the inscription on the headstone. Sergeant Michael Rodriguez, 170, 3rd Airborne, 1949, 1969, beloved son and hero. As he arranged the fresh flowers in his hands, something happened. His hands began to tremble. He felt tightness in his chest. He remembered that moment from 55 years ago. Slowly, he knelt before the headstone. In Kenneth's mind, that June morning of 1969 came alive. He was an 18-year-old soldier in the Graves Registration Unit tent in Saigon. That morning, he was doing routine work again. Packing fallen soldiers' belongings, preparing letters to be sent to families, coordinating transportation procedures. When Sergeant Rodriguez's file came in, Kenneth had opened the folder. 20 years old, from the Bronx, New York. Mother Maria Rodriguez, father Carlos Rodriguez, only child. Kenneth had cried while packing Michael's belongings. In his wallet was a photo of his girlfriend. To Susan, with love forever, Michael, was written on the back. Every soldier comes home. Kenneth had said that day, "I'm going to take you home, Michael." Kenneth had made a promise that day as he loaded Sergeant Rodriguez's casket onto the plane. "I'll deliver you to your family, brother. I'll take you home with honor." Every soldier in the Graves Registration Unit made the same promise. No soldier left behind. Everyone comes home. Kenneth had taken special care preparing Michael's file. Every document complete, every procedure done meticulously. Because he knew this would be the only thing the family could find comfort in during their darkest days. When Kenneth returned from Vietnam in 1971, he found work at a cemetery near his hometown. He thought it would be temporary, but 50 years had passed. His daily visits to veteran graves weren't coincidental. He might have brought home every soldier in those graves at one time. At 10 a.m., the Memorial Day ceremony began. Hundreds of people from Pine Valley Town had come. Veteran families, active soldiers, townspeople. Kenneth watched the ceremony from a distance. He usually stayed in the background during such events. He didn't want to attend the ceremony in his work clothes. The mayor was giving a speech. "Today here, we remember our heroes who sacrificed their lives for our freedom." Kenneth had heard every speech. Every year, the same words, same emotions. But there were few people who knew the truth behind those words. During the ceremony, Kenneth stood by Sergeant Rodriguez's grave. After the ceremony, visitors would leave, and he would be alone with the graves again. When the ceremony ended, most people began to disperse. Kenneth returned to cleaning duties, discarded flower papers, drink cans. Just then, a young man approached him. About 25 years old, wearing a military uniform. He had a bouquet of flowers in his hand. "Excuse me," said the young man. "I'm Tommy Rodriguez. I'm Sergeant Michael Rodriguez's nephew. I'm looking for my uncle's grave." Kenneth's heart raced. "Rodriguez," he repeated. "Of course, this way, please." He led Tommy to Sergeant Rodriguez's grave. Kenneth watched as the young man placed the flowers. "I never knew my uncle," Tommy said. "He was killed in Vietnam before I was born, but the family always talked about him." Tommy continued talking as he arranged the flowers. "I heard many stories about my Uncle Michael. He was a very brave soldier. He always dreamed of returning to his family." Kenneth listened quietly. Every word brought back memories from 55 years ago. "My mother Maria is Michael's sister," Tommy said. "She would always tell us how they cried when Michael's body came home, but she said they were proud at the same time." "Proud," Kenneth repeated. "Yes, because Michael had returned home with honor. The Graves Registration Unit had taken great care. Everything was perfect. His uniform, belongings, documents. My mother always says, someone really valued Michael." Kenneth's eyes filled with tears. After 55 years, he was learning that his care from that day had been appreciated. "You work at this cemetery, don't you?" Tommy asked. "Yes," Kenneth said. "I've been here for 50 years. 50 years? Wow. So you've always protected my uncle's grave." "Thank you." Kenneth swallowed hard. I just do my job." "No," Tommy said. "This isn't just a job. This is love. This is respect. I can see how you've cared for my uncle's grave. You've paid attention to every detail." Tommy pointed to the headstone. "Look, everything is perfect. The flowers, flag, the cleanliness of the headstone. It's as if a family member came and arranged it." Kenneth couldn't bear it anymore. "Tommy," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Kenneth took a deep breath. It was time to share the secret he had kept for 55 years. I'm not just a cemetery groundskeeper," he said. "I mean, I've worked here for 50 years, but before that I had another job." Tommy looked curious. "In 1969, I was in Vietnam. I served in the Graves Registration Unit. I was 18 years old." Tommy's eyes widened. You were a soldier?" "Yes, And I was the person who prepared your uncle's body, Tommy. I brought him home." These words shocked Tommy. His mouth fell open. He couldn't speak. "The one who packed Michael's belongings, prepared the documents for his family, loaded his casket onto the plane." "That was all me," Kenneth said. Kenneth touched the headstone. "I've been coming here every day for 55 years, Tommy, because I made him a promise. I said, I'll bring you home. And I did." Tommy was still in shock. You're really the person who brought my uncle home?" "Yes, son. I was one of hundreds of soldiers serving in Graves Registration during that time. Our job was to deliver fallen soldiers to their families with honor." Kenneth's voice was trembling. "I remember Michael's file, 20 years old, from the Bronx. In his wallet was a photo of a girl named Susan." "Susan," Tommy said. "Yes, my uncle's fiancée. She married someone else later but never forgot my uncle. I was very careful when preparing Michael, because I knew this was the family's hardest day. I wanted it to be an honorable farewell at least." Kenneth began telling Tommy about those days. The Graves Registration Unit was one of the Army's most difficult units, both physically and emotionally. Our job wasn't just transporting bodies. We knew every fallen soldier's story and tried to deliver them to their families in the best way possible. Tommy listened carefully. "I cried while packing Michael's belongings," Kenneth said. "He was so young. He was just at the beginning of life, but he did his duty to the end. Every soldier comes home," Kenneth had said that day. This was Graves Registration's motto. "When I returned from Vietnam in 1971, I had trouble adjusting to normal life. But when I found work at this cemetery, I realized my duty wasn't finished yet. I've worked here for 50 years because this is my life purpose," Kenneth said. "The mission I started in Vietnam continues here." Tommy looked amazed. You've been protecting my uncle's grave for 55 years? "Not just for Michael," Kenneth said. "For the 847 veterans here. Each has a story, each has a family." Kenneth pointed to the veterans section. "I didn't bring most of the soldiers in this cemetery home, but I protect them all with the same care, because they all made the same sacrifice. When families come here, I want them to commemorate their loved ones with honor. Just like you remember Michael." Tommy was crying now. This is incredible. How lucky my uncle was. To have someone like you bring him home." "Tommy," Kenneth said, "is your mother Maria still alive?" "Yes, she's 75 years old. Still very healthy. Could I meet her? I've wondered for 55 years how Michael's family lived with this loss." Tommy immediately agreed. "Of course, my mother would want to see you. She's always wondered who the soldiers were who brought my uncle home." The next day, Tommy brought his mother Maria to the cemetery. When 75-year-old Maria saw Kenneth, she began to cry. You're really the person who brought my brother home?" she asked. Kenneth nodded. "Yes, Maria. I delivered Michael to you." Maria hugged Kenneth. "I've wanted to thank you for 55 years. My brother returned home with honor. Everything was perfect." Maria told Kenneth about those days. "When Michael's body came, we saw how carefully it had been prepared. His uniform was spotless, his documents were complete. What I remember most was how his belongings were packed. Everything was placed so meticulously, as if a precious gift had been wrapped." Kenneth's eyes filled with tears. Michael was precious. Every soldier is precious. Those were very difficult days. Maria said, "But Michael's honorable return gave us strength. Someone had really valued him, had taken care." Tommy interjected. "Mom, Kenneth has been protecting Uncle's grave for 50 years. He comes here every day." Maria was surprised. 50 years. Why? Kenneth answered, "Because I made him a promise, Maria. I said, I'll bring you home. And that promise didn't end with just delivering his body." Tommy shared Kenneth's story on social media. It caused a big stir in Pine Valley town. The local newspaper wanted to interview Kenneth. The mayor suggested organizing an honor ceremony. But Kenneth declined all attention. "I just did my job," he would say. Thousands of soldiers in Graves Registration did the same thing, but the townspeople insisted. They wanted to honor this quiet hero who had lived among them for 50 years. Veteran families began coming to thank Kenneth. Each had a story. Each had gratitude for Kenneth. Kenneth was no longer just a cemetery groundskeeper. He had become one of the town's most respected people. A week later, a special visitor came to the cemetery. Retired Colonel Patricia Williams, 75 years old, was a Vietnam veteran. "I'm looking for Kenneth Bradley," she said. When Kenneth introduced himself, Colonel Williams saluted. "I was in Vietnam too, Sergeant Bradley. I commanded in the 173rd Airborne Division." Kenneth was surprised. 173rd, Sergeant Rodriguez's unit. "Yes, I knew Michael Rodriguez. He was a very brave soldier." Colonel Williams continued, "I heard your story from Tommy Rodriguez. I came to find you because I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "Kenneth, soldiers who served in the Graves Registration Unit are heroes. You made the final journey of fallen soldiers honorable." Colonel Williams had brought Kenneth an offer. "The Pentagon is inviting you to the Vietnam Veteran Recognition Ceremony." Kenneth hesitated. I just did my job." "No, Kenneth, you did much more than that, and the military appreciates it." Colonel Williams gave Kenneth a special letter. It came from the Pentagon. When he read the letter, Kenneth began to cry. After 55 years, his service in the Graves Registration Unit was being officially recognized. "This isn't just a piece of paper," Colonel Williams said. "This is recognition of your 55 years of sacrifice." The letter in Kenneth's hand represented the gratitude of thousands of families to him. A month later, Kenneth went to Washington with Tommy and Maria. At the Pentagon ceremony, he would receive the Vietnam Veteran Recognition Medal. There were hundreds of veterans and families in the ceremony hall. Kenneth couldn't believe so many people had come for him. The general giving the speech talked about the sacrifice of Graves Registration Unit soldiers. These soldiers didn't fight on the battlefield, but they had a duty harder than war, taking their fallen comrades home with honor. When Kenneth's name was called, it was difficult for him to stand. At 73 years old, receiving this recognition after 55 years. As he received the medal, the general said, "Every soldier who served in Graves Registration is a hero." When they returned to Pine Valley from the Pentagon, the town had come to greet Kenneth. The mayor, veteran families, townspeople. When Kenneth showed his medal, everyone applauded. But Maria and Tommy applauded the most. "This medal isn't just mine," Kenneth said. "This is the medal of thousands of soldiers who served in Graves Registration." The town decided to open a park in Kenneth's honor. They would name it Kenneth Bradley Memorial Park. But Kenneth suggested a different name, Fallen Heroes Memorial Park, because this park should be in memory of fallen soldiers. Kenneth was no longer just a cemetery groundskeeper. He had become the town's most respected person, but his routine hadn't changed. Every morning at 6 a.m. he would come to the cemetery and visit the veteran section. But he was no longer alone. Tommy would come every weekend and help Kenneth. Maria would also visit once a month. Kenneth's story was also featured in national media. The importance of the Graves Registration Unit began to be discussed. Many veteran families reached out to Kenneth to thank him. Each of their stories was very valuable to Kenneth. History Channel decided to make a documentary about Kenneth's story. They called it The Last Honor, Graves Registration Stories. Kenneth was initially reluctant. "I'm not the main character of the story," he said. "The real heroes are the fallen soldiers." But the producers insisted. "Your story is the story of thousands of Graves Registration soldiers." During filming, Kenneth relived those days in Vietnam. It was difficult, but he knew it was necessary. "People should know what the Graves Registration Unit did," he said. "How hard we worked to ensure every fallen soldier returned home with honor." When the documentary aired, it received great interest. Kenneth received thousands of thank you letters. Kenneth decided to retire at age 73. He had worked at the cemetery for 50 years and completed his mission. But Tommy made an offer. "Kenneth, we don't want to lose your experience. Would you work as a part-time consultant?" Kenneth accepted. He would come 3 days a week to supervise the maintenance of veteran graves. Additionally, Kenneth established the Veteran Family Support Program in town, a program where families of the fallen met with veterans. Through this program, hundreds of families found each other. This movement Kenneth started began to be taken as an example nationwide. Kenneth's last official Memorial Day came. It was his 50 Honest Memorial Day in Pine Valley. This time, the ceremony was different. Kenneth had been invited as the main speaker. In his speech, he said, I've worked at this cemetery for 51 years. I know the story of every soldier here. But the real story is in their families, in their sacrifices, in their quiet heroism. The most important thing I learned in the Graves Registration Unit was this: no soldier left behind. Everyone comes home. Kenneth's speech received a standing ovation. At 73 years old, after 55 years, it was the biggest applause he had ever received. After the ceremony, Kenneth went to Sergeant Michael Rodriguez's grave. He knelt one last time. "I completed my mission, Michael," he said. "I protected you and all your comrades. Now I can leave with peace of mind." When Kenneth stood up, Tommy was beside him. "Thank you, Kenneth, for protecting my uncle, all of us." Kenneth smiled. "It was an honor for me, Tommy, the greatest honor." If these powerful stories appeal to you too, don't forget to subscribe to the Last Stand channel. We'll continue to bring you more hero stories every week. Kenneth Bradley still lives in Pine Valley today. At 73 years old, he still visits veteran graves. But he's no longer alone. Through the Veteran Family Support Program he started, hundreds of families found each other. Through his story, the importance of the Graves Registration Unit was understood. And every Memorial Day, Kenneth's words are remembered. No soldier left behind. Everyone comes home. Because real heroes quietly do their duty and never boast.